Hello and welcome to Module 7 of the English Speaking and Writing course. Today we'll talk about clauses. What are clauses? A clause is a group of words that contains a subject and a verb that have a relationship. It must contain a related subject and verb. That means the subject and the verb must have a relationship. Sometimes a clause can function as a sentence on its own, but that doesn't happen every time. Now let's talk about the types of clauses. We have two main types of clauses. One is independent clause and the second is dependent clause. What is an independent clause? An independent clause is the main clause in a sentence. So it can also be called main clause. It can stand on its own as a distinct sentence. That is why it's called independent clause. It can stand on its own. It can make sense as a distinct sentence. Here are examples. The woman wept. The woman wept is an independent clause or a main clause. It can stand on its own as a distinct sentence and it makes sense. John eats eggs. This is another example of an independent clause. Now we have yet another one here. Ben was promoted because he was hardworking. If you take away because he was hardworking, Ben was promoted still makes sense. It can stand on its own as a distinct sentence. So Ben was promoted in this sentence is an independent clause. Don't forget, independent clauses can stand on their own as distinct sentences. An independent clause is also called the main clause. And let's see the next one, which is dependent clause. A dependent clause is also known as a subordinate clause, and it depends on an independent clause to clearly express its idea or an idea. A dependent clause is also known as a subordinate clause, and it depends on independent clauses to clearly express ideas. They can't stand on their own. That is why they are called dependent clauses. It's a dependent clause. It needs an independent clause to make sense. Let's see an example here, or two examples. He bought a shirt which was too expensive. Which was too expensive cannot stand on its own in this context. It really needs he bought a shirt for it to clearly express this idea. Another one is she knows the man who stole the goat. Who stole the goat is a dependent clause in this sentence. Now let's move ahead and see the different types of dependent clauses. Dependent clauses can be grouped into three, or we have three types of dependent clauses. We have the noun clause, we have adjectival clause, and we have adverbial clause. Let's start with the first, noun clause. A noun clause is a clause that takes the role of a noun. It takes the role of a noun. Lots of noun clauses start with that, how, who, which, what, where, why, or when. If you can substitute the clause with a noun and it still makes sense, then what you get is most probably a noun clause. Here are examples. What John did shocked his friends. What John did shocked his friends. What John did is a noun clause. Jane told Hannah to remember who she was. Jane told Hannah to remember who she was. Who she was here is a noun clause. You can substitute these clauses with any noun and it's still going to make sense. Let's see the other type. We have adjectival clause. This one takes the role of an adjective. It starts with relative pronouns such as who, whom, whose, which, or that. Don't forget, adjectival clauses takes the role of an adjective. It modifies the subject in the sentence. Here are examples. My friend who lives in London has come home. Who lives in London modifies my friend, which is the subject, the noun in the sentence. Here's another example. The car which I bought is the best around. Which I bought is an adjectival clause. It modifies the subject, the car. So this is adjectival clause. It takes the role of an adjective. The third, adverbial clause. Adverbial clause acts as an adverb. It answers questions like how, when, where, why, and to what extent. Here are examples. When I saw her, I was shocked. When I saw her is an adverbial clause. It answers the questions when. The other one, she cried because she was jilted. Because she was jilted is the adverbial clause. It answers the question why. So these are examples of adverbial clauses or an adverbial clause. These acts as an adverb and they answer questions like how, when, where, why, and to what extent. Okay. Now you might have wondered, or some have asked, how does clauses affect a sentence or sentences? A main or independent clause can be a simple sentence. Example here is the woman wept. This is a simple sentence because it contains just a main or an independent clause. Now, when we talk about a compound sentence, what do we mean? A compound sentence is a sentence that contains two or more independent clauses joined by a comma, semicolon, colon, or coordinating conjunction. If you remember fanboys, for, and, nor, but, or, yet, and so. Here are examples. I want to buy a phone, but I don't have money. This is a compound sentence. Another one, I like taking photos and he likes posing for them. This is another example of a compound sentence. Let's see two more. Complex sentence. A complex sentence consists of one independent clause or main clause and one or more dependent clauses. Here is an example. Mark went to his room after he finished reading. Mark went to his room is an independent clause. It can stand on its own. After he finished reading is a dependent clause. So together we get a complex sentence. When the dependent clause comes first, you need to put a comma after it. If you have a complex sentence, but the dependent clause comes first, please put a comma after it. Here is an example. When I was dating Lois, I had an accident. When I was dating Lois, I had an accident. When I was dating Lois, this is a dependent clause. It can stand on its own. I had an accident. This is an independent clause. It can stand on its own. So because a dependent clause comes first, you need to put a comma after it. When I was dating Lois, I had an accident. When I was dating Lois, I had an accident. So this is an example of a complex sentence. Now the last one. A compound complex sentence is a combination of a compound sentence and a complex sentence. It consists of two or more independent clauses and at least one dependent clause. This is how you get a compound complex sentence. It consists of two or more independent clauses and at least one dependent clause. Examples, or just an example here. I traveled to Lagos yesterday and I came back immediately because I didn't meet the lady there. I traveled to Lagos yesterday. I came back immediately because I didn't meet the lady there. Everything here together forms a compound complex sentence. So you can see that clauses are important in English language, the same thing as phrase and every other part of a sentence. So I hope you've learned a lot on clauses today, and I hope to see you in the next module. Thank you very much and have a beautiful day.